Welcome, Teachers on Fire, to another edition of the Teachers on Fire Roundtable, my opportunity to chat with other educators who are sparking the thinking and igniting the practice of others. I'm here today with three recent authors, so this is a real treat to chat with three who have a book recently out or have one on the way. And we're going to hear about their book, their passions, but also about their journey. What did the writing and publishing process look like for them, and what can we take away, especially for those who perhaps have an interest in joining that writing and publishing journey themselves as well. So I'm going to open by, of course, welcoming you all here today, this morning with me, and then would you go ahead and introduce yourselves? Tell us about who you are, what your context and education looks like, and we'll hold off on the books just for the time being. So Rochelle, would you start things off?
Sure. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I am Rochelle Dene-Poth. I am currently a Spanish and STEAM teacher. I've been at my school, which is located near Pittsburgh, for a really long time. I don't say how many more years because I lose track, but I've been teaching for a while. I'm also an author and an attorney and do a lot of consulting in my spare time, but excited to be here with all of you today. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome here. I've been following your work for a long time, Rochelle, and we're finally connecting in real time. So this is great. Yeah. Dave, over to you.
I'm Dave Franjosa. I am a physics teacher at Pascack Hills High School in Montvale, New Jersey. I work primarily with our striving learners, which are students that typically have challenges meeting with success on a regular basis. I've been at Hills for 9 years and teaching overall for 15.
Okay, and Jillian.
Awesome. Well, I am Jillian, and I am from Clearwater, Florida, which some people don't know where Clearwater is, but it is just across the bay from Tampa. So we're in the Tampa Bay area and an hour and a half away from Disney. That's what I always tell people. And they're like, oh, we know Disney. Okay. So I am a wife and a mom and a teacher, and I currently serve as a second grade educator in a private school nearby. And I've been in education for 20 years. I like to say 2 decades. I think that sounds a little more classy. So like 2 decades, right? And no, I love it. Second grade is probably my favorite age. I've taught third and fourth, but second is awesome. They're just old enough to be independent and young enough to still obey.
So good to have each of you. We've got some veterans on board, me included. I'm a 2-decade kind of teacher as well. I like that. We're going to go back around, and I want you to share with us about your recent book. That's what brought us all here today. Well, me accepted, but tell us about your book. Why did you write it? Who is it for? And what do you hope readers will take away from it? Jillian, why don't you go first on that?
Awesome. Well, my book is called Lives Seashells, and it is I started just as it being just a children's book. I love to write things for my kids. I love to write with my kids at school, but this one was actually just from my heart, and it is a picture book that probably has a very important social emotional message to it. So while it looks like a children's book, it has a message for everybody. That Liv is a young girl that she loves to go to the seashore, and she loves to collect things, but she doesn't collect the perfect and pristine things. She collects the things that are broken and damaged and the things that nobody picks up. And it's funny. I've had a lot of people that say, I've read your story, and guess what? I go to the beach now and I don't look for the perfect seashells. I look for the ones that are broken and I collect them. So it's just, Liv is just knows how to give compassion and empathy to those special things that need it the most. So
I'm all ready for story time, Jillian. I'm ready to get into it. That's a great sell, and I love the metaphor. Dave, tell us about your recent book.
So my book will be out in March of this coming year. So it's Going Gradeless, shifting focus to student learning. So the reason I wrote this is learning is not a competition. It's a process. That process, it's messy. It's not linear. And it relies on learning from failure. But most of the discussions that we're having, it's centering learning on high achieving students. So when you do that, you're giving our striving learners this laundry list of things that are wrong with them. You're looking for gaps in their education, you're looking for gaps in their skills, and you're looking for everything that's wrong with the child, which going from that deficit thinking, it's really daunting and overwhelming and kind of impedes the learning process for them. So we shift to a more strengths-based perspective where, how can we find the unique things that each student brings to the table and enhance those and just grow from there. So I felt it was important that, we can show how we can create a culture of learning without grades that has a high level of accountability. This isn't just a science book. We do this in the physics classroom, but I've met with math teachers, ELA, history. My wife, who's an art teacher, we've designed this framework for her course as well. So I'm just hoping that teachers understand that we don't have to do things the way that we've always done it. There is a way out there where students can learn. We can support them and open up education to more people.
Give us the title of your book again, Dave.
It's called Going Gradeless, Shifting Focus to Student Learning.
Shifting focus to student learning. And we had a question from Mark, who's tuning in from Dubai, and he says, is it a research-based book? Which is a great question, because we've got a lot of books in the education space that are not research-based, and that may be okay, but is your book heavily cited? Tell us about that.
All right, so we developed this model from the ground up. When I started, it was just kind of, I was frustrated with grades, and I just kind of figured out a way that I could move away from those. And as we went through, we started doing student surveys, taking notes. So I have almost 400 student surveys that we reference in the book. I did a great analysis on over 1,000 students over a 7-year period. Plus, we do build our model on educational research, such as Ruth Butler's work, cognitive load theory. It's rooted in research, and we do present the data that we've collected over the implementation. We started this in the 15-16 school year. So that is presented. So it's a little bit of everything. We discuss why we made the choices that we made, because going gradeless is a hotly debated topic right now. So there's a lot of views on it. There's a lot of ways to do it. So we kind of outline, based on that educational research, why we made the choices that we made, what happened with some of our earlier attempts, why they didn't work, how we moved away from it, how we corrected it. And we also kind of designed this for teachers who are currently going gradeless. If you've hit a plateau and you don't know how to get past that plateau, we did the same thing. So we hit that plateau and we kind of powered through it by relying on that educational research. So I wouldn't say it's heavily cited. We reference it, we discuss it, we say how it's applied, and we present the data that we collected over 5 years.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it has to be heavily cited. I think sort of there are pros and cons. Unfortunately, your typical teacher will not read graduate level work right now. If it's filled with citations, that's just a reality. But that's certainly an interesting landscape. A lot of books coming out on this topic, and I'm strongly on the going gradeless train as well. So I'm going to be looking forward to this one. Rochelle, you are not new to the writing and publishing game by any stretch, but tell us about your most recent book.
Thanks. My book is True Story: Lessons That One Kid Taught Us, and I actually got my real copy now, thanks to Amazon. It came the other day, but it's a book that hey, Jillian, I could do that too. We didn't plan that. It's a book, actually, it came to be in a strange kind of way, because what I was doing is I had been writing a couple of different books, and I was thinking about my experience as a teacher over my entire career and trying to think about interactions with students, interactions with colleagues, times where I lost my cool or something, or yelled, like I really tend not to yell or anything, but just those different interactions and lessons that I learned, or things that kind of all came to be over time. And so I started to make this list, and I was going through, and I was actually thinking and saying to my students one day, like, hey, do you remember that time that this thing happened and this thing? And when I looked at the whole picture of it, I was thinking about what the lessons were. And sometimes there were some things that happened that were just like really challenging, frustrating experiences for me. Like I had an interaction with a student, and it went really, really badly. And I felt terrible about it. And so it pushed me to reflect. And it was like, what did I learn from that? How do we grow from that? And so I kept that list going. And I thought, I wonder if I could write about like that one kid. So that's kind of it. I fell into that idea. But then I love sharing other people's stories, which is what I had done in two of my other books. And I thought it can't just be about my experience. Like I need to know, like I want to learn about who was that one kid the other teachers had, because we've had tons of those kids, right? So I started to just gather some different stories from, I think I have 38, including myself, teachers in this book that talk about, and some of them are funny. Some will make you roll your eyes. Some will make you cry. But the point is like, we never know. We may never know what impact we have on students, but they all have an impact on us in some way. And we don't necessarily have enough time sometimes to even think about it. And it might not even come to us until years later, which for me, like I said, when I was going back through, and I still have a long list of stories I could share. But the other piece of it was like stories where you tell somebody, like, seriously, that's a true story. And they're like, there's no way that happened. You're like, no, true story. And so that's kind of where the title came to be. And then there's a part of the story that is more personally connected to me because of a friend that I had lost about 1.5 years ago. So it's interesting how this all kind of came together. And my hope is that teachers, and not even just teachers, I mean, anybody could read this, parents, anyone, just to take the stories away and to think about your own experience as a student, what your children are going through in their experiences as students in schools. But I hope it's like, it doesn't have the research in it because it's just like what everybody is experiencing. And I hope that people will pick it up, read it, and know, okay, I'm not alone. That's the same thing that happened to me. Or take a better look and be more intentional about connecting with students in your classroom and realize like there are kids out there that need us. And we might not necessarily see that on a daily basis, but we have to make those points in our day to check in on all students and see which ones need us. And the flip side of that too is which ones we need the most too.
Some great ideas there. Thank you, Rochelle. I love the idea that you are you're memorializing these amazing stories, right? Because I feel like for all of us, the more the years sort of bleed into each other and a lot of these stories get lost. So you are, it's kind of a legacy piece in a way. I want to say hello to a lot of great educators in the comments. Good morning to Mark Ryan. Again, I mentioned him coming in from Dubai. AJ Bianco, Debbie Tannenbaum. Let's see, Alfonso Mendoza is here, a number of people, and a great comment from Sherry. I put it up a moment ago. She says, 14-year educator in Georgia, started a small tutoring business after being unable to find a teaching job within a school district. I probably have a book in me too. I just need to live it a bit more. Love that. And she seems to know Rochelle. So welcome, Sherry Lucas Hall. I want to park on that idea for a moment. And that's not one of my scheduled questions, but I think it's so powerful. I think back to one of the guests on my podcast, Dr. Douglas Fisher, who said every educator has that book inside them. What is your advice to Sherry? I mean, yes, she recognizes she's got that story in her, but she says, I just need to live it a bit more. So a part of me as a creator, as someone who wants to encourage educators to create and share their ideas, I want to say, Sherry, don't wait. Get started on that process now. Any thoughts for Sherry from any of the three of you?
Go ahead. We all have something to say, I'm sure. No, I think it's all about just having your voice and understanding that you have a story to tell and your story is unique to you. It is personal to you. It is, you are the only person that's going to be able to tell your narrative. So, and you're the only person that will. So to find that inspiration deep inside of you and just to bring it alive, there is no other feeling like it. Like I've always been the kind of quiet, introverted. Yeah, I'm a teacher. I love it. But now I don't know, especially after being in social media for quite a while now and being able to see other people and be inspired by other people express themselves. I'm like, heck yeah, I can do it. So you just stick yourself out there and do it. Tell your story.
Debbie says, I've been working on a draft, hoping to finish it in 2021. And Debbie Tannenbaum, I really appreciated your last blog post where you talked about every blog post can be sort of a future chapter in that book, right? I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. We may have to go to muting, or I'll see if that is me. Hopefully not. Thoughts from you, Rochelle or Dave?
So I would say I'm with you, Tim. I think if you have an idea, just start getting it on paper, because when you go back to write it, you may actually like the way that you said it in your head before, and it's hard to get that back. So just get it out there, refine it later. But if you have an idea, just put it down.
Nice. And Rochelle, anything to add? Sherry says, my focus is presently on tutoring because I understand this current need for change in how we are teaching reading right now. My book will come after this work, but then she adds, or maybe during this work. Rochelle, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree totally with what Jillian and Dave said. And the other thing too is just start even with blogging, because that's how I started. It's great for your own reflection. And the only other thing that I will say is a great quote that I had read from Brene Brown a couple of years ago when I was writing, and I was like struggling. I'm like, what do I write? What do I say? And the quote that I read from, and I forget which one of her books, but she said, write the book that you need to read. And so if you think about your own experience and your challenges and whatever you're going through, like what is something that would help you or would have helped you, whether you have many years of experience or not? Like everybody has their own unique experiences to share. And it's how you get started. So don't delay. I would say just start writing today. I didn't mean for that to rhyme either.
Yeah, Rochelle, you're such a great model of that. I think of you just as a constant machine. There's always something in motion, and I really respect and get inspired by that. So thank you. Question number 3 is this: talk about the writing and publishing journey. I guess we've sort of just dipped into it a little bit here, but what are some pieces of advice you could share with would-be writers in education? Let's end with Rochelle here, because she really is the expert. But Jillian, your book happens to be a storybook, so a little bit different. What is your advice? What are some of your takeaways from the writing and publishing process?
It was, I never intended to be an author. I just, like Rochelle said, I just started blogging. And, when you start blogging and putting your blogs out there, I think you get a little bit more confident in the journey. And I know Rochelle was one of those who she read my blog one time and went, oh my goodness, like, you need to think about writing a little bit more. So, once you have that one person that kind of like says, hey, you can do this, and believes in you, it really, it gets you going. So, and it helps you to dig deep within yourself to find your story. But the publishing part of it was, I wrote it, I sat on it. I wrote it after I had come home from school, we were done with COVID. Or we were spring break, and we all came home, didn't end up not going back. So like everybody else, I'm like struggling to find something to keep myself busy. I do not sit still for very long. So just started writing, put a story down, and I think I wrote it in like one day, and I just threw it in my Google Drive and I sat on it. And I just thought, what? It really was inspired deeply by my sister. It was a personal story. My sister was one of those people who loved everyone, who loved the broken, who loved the disheartened, who loved the underdogs, and she really kind of like lifted everybody up. So it was kind of tailored to be a tribute to her. But I sat on it, I submitted it to a few publishers, and they very, very graciously just said no thank you. And I thought, okay, not a big deal. It's, something I can tuck away, and it's still in my heart. I've got it out there, and maybe I'll do something with it later. Months later, I had a kind of a personal day that I took off work, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to shoot it out to one more, just for the fun of it, to see what happens. So I shot it out there to Codebreaker, and an hour later, I had a response. And they're like, we love your story. We want to publish it. I'm like, okay, do you have an illustrator? I'm like, no, but I can find one. So I asked my aunt. My aunt says, nope, not going to do it. You can do it. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I ended up doing it myself. So I was able to author and illustrate my own book, which is amazing. And it was published, honestly, within 3 weeks from that day. So,
wow.
Yeah, crazy.
I'm digesting a few of those details. So you said you sat down and basically wrote it in one day. Mm-hmm. And did you do any tweaking or editing? I mean, after you sleep, usually you come back and you look at your work and you're like, ooh, I want to change. Or was it just, it was good to go?
You know, it evolved so organically that it was such a natural thing that came out. And I tweaked, a few words here and there. It does have, it's definitely not a lower level children's book. It definitely has some vocabulary that's pretty rich. So, nice. Which leads for excellent, curiosity and wonder and conversation. So I tweaked it a little bit, but not the storyline. The storyline was generally the same. So, yeah.
As we continue around, we do want to give a lot of love to our publishers. So, Jillian, you're with Codebreaker. Dave, you're with Corwin, I believe. And Rochelle with EduMatch. Is that right? So, props to those three publishers. They're a little different. Each of them is a little different. But if you are catching us here on the live broadcast or on the replay, keep those three in mind. Dave, over to you. Talk about what you've picked up from the journey. What can you pass on? And you're still in the throes of it in some ways.
Yeah. So like Jillian, I did not set out to be an author. Like I said, we were collecting data, just trying to make the class better. And at the end of it, we figured we have to share this. So the one thing that I did pick up, I didn't realize how in-depth the process was, just even from the pitch. So I had to write a 7-page prospectus with samples of the writing to send out. And each publisher has some different criteria, different guidelines. So make sure you're not just blanketly sending one pitch to every publisher. Read their guidelines, see what they want, tailor your submission to what their guidelines are. And the other thing that Jillian said that really resonated with me is you're going to need to find a good support system, because your work will most likely get rejected. And like that's a tough pill to swallow. But understand that a rejection of your work is not a rejection of your ideas. I had tried to write a few articles that I submitted to different publications, but you're up against people who have already published, well-established names, and especially in a field like this that's so crowded when you talk about grade lists, there's some big names there. And here I am, somebody who has not published anything. And when you look at it, all the applications, they ask, what have you published? And my answer was nothing. So that already put me a little bit behind everybody else. So don't get discouraged if what you write gets rejected. Somebody will find value in it. And I'm very fortunate that Corwin did see value in what we wrote. So I'm kind of at the end of the process. There's nothing else that I have to do. It's going to production now. We just finished our proofreading, and they've been great the entire time. A good team makes a tremendous difference. We've gotten such great feedback. It's a little tough when you pour your heart and soul into work over like months or years, and then somebody says, yeah, that's not working for me. And then you go back and you revise it, but it definitely made the work better. I do appreciate everything that they did, and it was a great experience.
There's so much we could say there about multiple iterations of work and just that feedback process. I mean, in a way, you're the student, right? When you go through that and you have, I would imagine, I mean, I've been watching these publishers for some time. My one critique of Corwin is that their prices seem to be always 3 times as high as these other smaller publishers, but they do create great stuff. and it's really important to, I would say, the education professional community, right? It's all really strong stuff, research backed and peer reviewed, and maybe that's part of that pricing model. Corwin just is sort of a bigger, seems to be a bigger machine, but. Yeah, I would imagine with Corwin, you probably do get the manuscript. It sounds like this happened to you, Dave, where you got the manuscript back and there was a lot of red ink on it, so to speak.
Yeah, so we had been working, and like I said, we had notes for years that we said, okay, well, these are chapters, and when we put it together, we sent it out, and we got our peer review back, and they didn't like the order of the chapters, and things that we were too close to the work. That's really what it was. So that peer review process is really important, because things that we take for granted because we talk about it every day, somebody who's from the outside in trying to understand what's in our head, their feedback was very beneficial. And yet we did get a lot of red ink, not so much on the ideas, but just on the presentation of it. Like, this wasn't clear. What were you trying to convey there? And it did make a more clear message. So I'm very happy with the final version of the book. And I think without any of those steps, it wouldn't be what it is now. And I mean, I've dealt with peer reviewers. I have an acquisitions editor, the image editor. There was somebody a production editor. So there's a lot of people involved in that chain. Typesetters. So I don't know. I'm not involved with the pricing. So, I just give them the content. But, there were a lot of people involved in the process. And we're almost, by the time it's released, it'll be a full year that we've been working on the project with Corwin.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I want to be clear that I'm a big Corwin fan. I've attended their events, and they are nothing but quality and depth. Absolutely. Rochelle, you must have so much that you could share. You could write a book about this question, I'm sure, but give us whoops, that's the wrong question. Give us some of the gems that you've picked up from the years of publishing.
Yeah, and I want to go back to, I think it was Sherry's question too about blogging. I mean, really, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like, it can just be jotting ideas down in a notebook, Post-it notes throughout your day if you're teaching your classroom, of things that happen that you can go back to. My biggest trick is often I will just go take a walk and I talk and I use the voice to text, and then I come back and I fix it, try to figure out what exactly did I say that sounded like this. But it saves a lot of time in the process. So that's all I can say about the blogging for now. But as far as publishing, I have worked with multiple different publishers for my books. So they're all different. And the process is very different, because for some, I know that, like Dave was saying, you have this whole, you have to look at the website, and there's a whole process where you do have to submit sometimes a chapter or a full outline with summaries for each, and then you have to do kind of a market research behind it and compare what's out there. How's your book different? Who's the target audience? And that, I think, one that I had done for when I did my book for ISTE, it was about a year that it took from the idea to going through to submitting it to the peer review to coming back and fixing it until I actually had the contract. And then I wrote the book in 3 months. And so it was, the whole span of it was probably about a year and a half. And then now with my most recent book with EduMatch, it has been about a year, and you go through some of the same things, except you are more in control with, putting your pictures in and whatever citations or anything that you need around that. But you do have a peer focus group, and you go back and you edit, and it still takes a lot of time. And so whenever you finally get to that point, like my book came out officially about a week ago, it's even when I was going back through and reading it multiple times, the whole thing over, you find mistakes or you find things that you want to improve upon. And it's not easy to do, but I think it's so good and so important for us as educators to just be able to put our ideas out there. And whether it's a blog or whether it's a podcast or whether it's just us writing in a journal every day, because all of those things accumulate over time, as we all know. And then you can then turn that into a book because it can definitely help somebody. And that's kind of what I did in a sense. When I first signed a contract, I actually had signed 3 at the same time and was writing 3 different books. But the first one that came out about quotes ended up being because I went to look at my notes from all of the books I had read and found these quotes. And I thought, these are interesting. I could apply these to education. And how do I think about what I'm doing in my classroom or changes I could make as an educator based on these quotes? And so that kind of ended up evolving into a book. So the process has been kind of all over the place. But for me, a lot of the work that I do comes from, I mean, more recently especially, is making sure that I'm connected, finding out what other people are doing and trying to share their stories. Because, I mean, just like we know we do presentations at a conference or something, if I'm telling you, like, this is the greatest tool ever and this is how I use it in my classroom, that's nice. But whenever you hear from students who are saying, like, this is how I'm using it, this is why it matters for me, and this is what I'm doing better because of it, that's kind of the take that I took on it whenever sharing stories. And I think anytime that we can tie in other people's stories or make reference. So if it's the research, that's great. If it's just personal connections that we have, pulling that in together to whoever you're going to pitch your idea to. Again, looking at all of the I can't even say it, publications, publishers, you know what I mean? Because they do have a very different process. Sometimes they just want an idea and an overview and an abstract, and sometimes it's this really, and it's hard to think about that whole long, like, I don't know what I want this whole book to include because I have this idea. So looking at all of the different options and finding something that meets, you know, maybe your timeline that you're looking at, your experience in writing, the comfort in other books that they put out too, and talking to people too, that's important as well.
Eileen says, lots of wonderful advice. I have to get off and we'll catch the rest on the recording. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us from Kuwait, Eileen. That's really special. And yes, absolutely, you'll be able to find this video on the Teachers on Fire YouTube channel. I want to speak to blogging for a moment. That's come up a few times, and I would be remiss if I didn't share with you and share with the viewers an opportunity that I'm happy to partner with you on, and that is the Teachers on Fire magazine. So Medium is how can I describe Medium? Medium is sort of a collection of blogs and posts, and I'll take you to Medium's main page here. I guess what sets Medium apart is that it's curated by humans. And so there is, there are people going through articles and sharing the ones that appear to be the best quality and so forth. So within that, you have publications, and I have one called the Teachers on Fire magazine. So if you are an educator and you're interested in writing, I would be happy to publish your pieces here. Medium also offers, I don't really like mentioning this every time, but it also offers compensation for posts based on engagement. So it is a little bit of an encouragement when you get a little bit of pocket change based on readership. And Debbie Tannenbaum, who's with us today, is one of my writers over there at Medium. I want to get back to these questions. Debbie, speaking of Debbie, she asked a really important one. And Rochelle, I feel like you sort of answered it. She said, do you recommend writing it all or sending more of a pitch or outline in before writing? Or does that depend on the publisher? And thinking of Jillian, I know Codebreaker says, just give us your idea, basically, right? And we'll partner with you. Rochelle, what's been your experience at EduMatch? Do they want to see more of the book sort of formed before you send in that proposal?
Yeah, I think the process has changed over, because I signed the one for that, or True Story book, last August. And so it's a constantly evolving process. I know when I had done that, I had listed, what I was planning to include in it, the different stories, the outline, even though that changed a lot from that point. But as it went forward, now some other ones do want to see like titles of chapters, a short overview of what you're going to include in that chapter, about how many words you think you'll have. Sometimes they do actually want to see fully written a chapter or 2 chapters in some cases. So it does vary. I know Corwin, I had looked at their experience, so Dave can speak to that. I signed a contract to write a book for Routledge. And so that process is like, I have 25 or 30 pages of text and documents about text, which was very similar to my experience with ISTE. that I found to be really stressful, but super rewarding because of having to put in all of the captions and all of that, and just the organizational aspect of it. But they're all very different, and definitely investing in the time. But I can say with 100% like spot on, Debbie and her blogs definitely needs to work towards like putting that book out there for sure.
Dave, how much of your manuscript did Corwin need to see before you signed that contract with them?
They wanted at least 2 or 3 chapters just so they could see the writing sample, the style. But I had to do the projected chapters with a brief description of what each one would be. I had the bulk. Well, I co-authored this with one of my colleagues. We teach in the same room, so this is something that we've done together. We had the bulk of this done before we had the prospectus, so we sent them probably about 75% of our book.
Okay.
That wasn't required. They wanted to see 2 to 3 chapters. They did want a description of each chapter. I had to do the market analysis, had to do other books that were in this space and compare how mine was different. So there were a lot of requirements behind the scenes. But to answer the question before, I really think it depends on the nature of the book and the publisher. So when you're talking about here we have an educational model. Like, I think there's a different focus than if you just have a general idea. So it depends on what you're trying to write, what the requirements would be, and then those different publishers have different things that they're looking for. And like Rochelle said, go to their website. They will clearly outline what their guidelines are, and make sure that you're giving them the pitch that they're looking for.
Right. Jillian, I know it's a little bit different in your case. I mean, you had the one-day book and it was ready to go. You just sent them the entire thing. But hearing from, I think it was Brandon Beck, Codebreaker, and Brian, Daphne, they're very open to ideas and just working with you from there. Do I have that right? Oh, and...
Yeah, sorry. I unmuted myself. Yes, I think that, like Dave was saying, the publishers all have different expectations of what they're looking for. And I remember filling out different forms, Google forms for different sites, and how different that was. That some of them did want, the data, and they wanted to know, outlines and whatnot. And so it was kind of, I was not really expecting them to say, oh, we love it. I was expecting them to say we need something else. So it kind of was different. I think it's different for a children's book. I think it is a little more different also with a social emotional type book. But, also when I filled out my form and when I submitted all that, I put in a little Flipgrid video, because I feel like sometimes that your words don't translate, your emotions don't translate like they should. And this was such an emotional and personal journey for me that I wanted them to understand, this is who I am. This is what my book is about, who I wrote it for. And even Daphne had come back and she said, nice touch with the video. That really helped us get, to know who you are as a person. So, I would even say, throw it out there too. If you, can include a little 1-minute video of yourself and just talk about your passion and what your book is about. That's
a great tip. I love that. Just like applying for a job, right? Why not include that video and humanize your application a little bit? Well, I don't want to stay too long on question number 4. And in fact, I'm actually behind in the comments. I wanted to reply to Laura here. She asked, hey, Teachers on Fire, do you publish pieces that are also published on our own blog sites? Absolutely. So what I personally do, Laura, is I typically publish first on Medium, sort of give them first crack at it, and then I repurpose those posts over onto my own blog. But I know there are some that switch that up. So again, trying to offer some ideas. If you're looking to start the blogging game, you certainly don't need to do it on Medium. You can start with your own WordPress site or however you want to go about that. And Debbie Tannenbaum says, this is great information. I probably have enough written already to reach out to some publishers. So question number 4 to all of you, we're not going to park too long on this, but looking back to the beginning of your writing and publishing journeys, what choices or moves do you regret now that you might do differently if given the chance? So speak to yourself way back at the beginning of the process. What is one thing you would do differently? Jillian?
Oh my goodness. I honestly, I would say nothing. I think for me, it was just, I'm sorry, nothing. Crickets. It was just such, like I said, an organic process that it happened when it happened, and it was for a purpose and a reason, and it was at the right time and the right place. And, so I'm just thankful. That's
awesome. Hey, that works too. Dave, there's got to be one thing. I know your process is a little bit longer. So what would you do differently?
I would have started blogging earlier. I would have tried to publish articles, just get that body of work out there before I submitted my manuscript. I didn't try and do any of that until I was already in the process of submitting my manuscript to Corwin. So that's something that I probably would have done from the beginning. But that's really about it. I'm very happy with the process. I think everything, the way I was supported throughout it has been awesome.
In terms of blogging as you go, I mean, I just see that as you're introducing yourself to a potential audience, you're sharing some of your ideas, you're building some momentum around your work. So that can only help, I'm sure, get the word out. And Rochelle.
Oh, yeah. And you just made me think of something, too, when you said that, Tim, about blogging. To go back to Sherry, is like another way to get started, too, just like you recommend the blogs, like guest blogging for somebody. Just share your ideas with somebody. Like we all would I'll post your blog on my site, because that definitely gets you exposed to another audience. And I love having guest blogs because I learned so much from it. So sorry to interject that there, but back to your question. I'm fortunate that I had that opportunity to kind of all right, I'm going to do this a second time. So how can I improve? And the first time when I was writing 2 of those 3 books, I was pulling in different stories from educators and some of my students. And I had a big Google form with quotes that I was going to put into 2 different books. And I had papers, and I didn't know whose was going in which book. So there was just papers taped all over my wall. So the thing I regret is that I used the papers taped all over my wall. The improvement was this time I had a document where I explained the 2 different projects I've been working on, the one that just came out recently, another one that'll be out in the spring. And I used a form, and I had people submit it, and between the 2 books that they were writing for. So now with a spreadsheet, even though they give me hives, I have them all there with all of the links all in that space, and I can easily sort them and see them. So what I regret is the lack of organization on my part when taking on such a big project, because I remember driving home from school one day, and it was around this time 2 years ago when all the books were due, and I thought, wait, I have to pull all those into books. I didn't realize that at the time. I just thought they were just going to magically appear, and they didn't. So moving forward, definitely recommend some type of organization or process or method.
You analog note takers, I can't understand you, because to me it's got to be digital. I need to be able to access it wherever I am and be able to build and sort of, I feel like I'm losing thoughts otherwise if I start putting up post-it notes, but I know that really works for some people. Absolutely. Those are great tips. Thank you so much. I want to ask, you've all got the bug now. You are all creators and have been for some time. So what is next for you? What are your content creation goals for 2021? We're going to talk next about OneWord. I don't know if Debbie Tannenbaum is still in the house, but I know OneWord 2021 is going to be a big deal for some people. But before we get there, just tell us about your content creation goals. So Rochelle, I'll go back to you. Is there another book in the works?
Yeah. There's one that is currently in limbo in edit right now that is called Things I Wish ... And it's gonna be filled in by things I wish I knew when I started teaching, things I wish administrators. It's however anybody who's writing a story. Now that one, I did change to have it be more of like a compilation of a bunch of different stories. And so right now, and I'm getting some additional stories. If anybody has the things I wish ... knew, let me know. That'll be probably, I think 45 educators or 50 right now. And then the book with Routledge will be for world language educators. That one is due in about 6 weeks. So I have a little bit of work to do on that one. And also thinking about working with a student who had done the cover for my first book and did part of the cover for this most recent book. We've been talking about potentially having that student write and illustrate a book on their own. So fingers are crossed for that to come in 2021.
Fantastic. I love the collaborations and compilations that you put together, Rochelle. It just makes so much sense, even from a promotion standpoint, right? Because you have this army of people who are invested in the work and they're partnering there with you. Dave, what about you? What have you, you must be just focused on getting your book out at this point. You're like, I can't, I don't have the bandwidth to think past that. Or how do you respond to that question?
Well, we just actually wrapped that up December, I think it was 16th. December 16th, we are done. It is just going to production. So I actually do have some time to create more stuff now. So I committed to one blog post a month. That was all I could really handle going through that process. We'll see with, in 2021 if I can maybe up that. But I also, on my website, I have infographics that kind of map out the steps that I took to going gradeless. And I'd really love to be able to create tutorials around them because I think that would be a good supplement to what we're doing. So that's something that's on my list for 2021.
That is something I will look forward to. I think I'm subscribed, Dave, to something like 125 blogs, and my wife thinks I'm crazy. But make sure to reach out and tag me when. And maybe is your blog already a thing, or is that something you need to get off the ground? Okay.
I've been writing since September, so one post a month in September. I'm putting it out there, so I post it every time I write a new one. So it's not all about gradeless. It's just different things. Like the one for this month is the title of it is "I Thought I Was a Good Teacher," and then then COVID hit, and so just that same thing, trying to let people know that you're not alone. Even everybody's struggling through this, and so that one I drop it on the first of the month. So that's when my blog comes out every month.
I know we've talked a lot about blogs. Wasn't really planning on that, but is your blog on WordPress, Dave?
Yeah, so it's a WordPress, but I also have a site that you can find it on either.
Sure. One thing I like about WordPress is that WordPress has a reader where you can, through the app or online on a computer, you can just go into the WordPress reader and sort of surf through all the blogs you're subscribed to in one place. So I really like that. Jillian, are you into the blogging game? What does content creation look like for you in 2021?
Well, that is actually how I got started. I love blogging, and I didn't think I would. And it was very hard to start because you feel so vulnerable actually getting your voice out there. And I don't think it was last month, I think, Tim, and we were on LinkedIn, and I said something about how this year was such an incredibly special year. And you went, "Hey, have you written about that yet?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." And that day, I think I sat down. I don't sit long. Like when somebody spurs me, I'm like, So I sat down, wrote it that day, and shot it out. And I'm like,
nice.
You just have to do it. You just start, in the words of Brian Esmal. So, so no, I continue to blog on my own WordPress site, but I have been asked to do a blog series for Teach Better Team. So I'm excited about that next year. And I've already written book number 2. So I just need to illustrate it and get that out there. So so I'm continuing to process and continuing. I think that writing it for me has become very therapeutic and very healing. So it is a way just to express yourself without being too out there, because you'll find the people that kind of are drawn to you. And you're writing I think the big takeaway for me was you're writing for somebody else. You're really not writing for you selfishly. You're writing to impart your own thoughts and your emotions and your joy to other people, hoping they'll take away something from what you have in your heart. So
Well, we've got Debbie Tannenbaum here with us today, and she wrote a post called Blogging is Self-Care. So I think a lot of us are with you on that, Jillian, that, man, it is just so... I love therapeutic. I'm going with your word. It's therapeutic. It's clarifying to sit down and just sort of understand yourself is such a healthy process. Well, we're coming to the end of our conversation, but I do want to ask you, are you a one-word kind of person? It's okay to say no to this. I know some people really hate it, but if you are a one-word kind of person, tell us what you've got on for 2021. Have you got that picked out yet, or is that still in the works? Jillian, are you a one word?
I first saw this in May because I had never even heard of it before. But when I jumped into Twitter, I saw OneWord 2020. And I'm like, oh man, I missed that. Totally. So I'm going to jump in on 2021. And my word for 2021 is contentment.
Love it. Okay, Dave, one word 2021. Where do you stand?
Purpose. So my word is purpose. Help me focus. Are the actions I'm taking, are they going to be productive?
Wow. Okay. Filtering everything through that why. And Rochelle.
I feel bad that I don't actually have mine picked out yet. But I was never one that did that. And people would say, like, what's your one word? And I said, I don't know. And I think a couple of years ago, Meredith Johnson, who does the Book Camp PD, had this, share your one word, and she was putting them all on her website. And so I started to pick one. And so I've had one, although I think this year I had two, but last year I had intentional. This year I had relentless and intentional. So I apparently it's not just one word, but I do like Sherry's word of tenacity, which is actually one of my themes in my new book, but I'm working on it. It may end up being intentional again, might also be mindful. I don't know. So, but I'll let you know.
I like Fawn's, his choice is create, which is awesome. That works for content creators. My word for this year was write, and although I didn't quite hit all of my goals, I did write more blog posts than I ever have before in 1 year, so I'm giving myself a bit of a round of applause for that. I want to go back to Sherry here. She says in the comments that's not the one I'm looking for. She says, I came up with my title while listening here. So Sherry, if you have a title for your blog, let us know, or I might be misunderstanding that, but go ahead and let us know in the comments what it is and what you came up with just by listening to us today. Well, thank you for your one words and letting us know where you stand on that. I'm still thinking about mine as well, so I don't have one to share yet, but I do have big hopes and dreams for 2021. Let us know as we start to say our goodbyes, how we can connect with you and your work, starting with you, Rochelle.
Yeah, so on Twitter and Instagram, pretty much everything, it's RDENE915. So my blog is there. I have a podcast that I do, so I would love to connect.
And I'm forgetting to put up this wonderful graphic. So here we go. There is Rochelle's email, and we've got a bit.ly there. Awesome. And Ardene 915. What's the story behind the 915 again, Rochelle?
Oh, that's almost embarrassing. No, it's not. It goes back to, it's actually because of my parents. Whenever AOL email, which that tells you how long ago that was, and whenever email first came out, my parents created their account and they used my dad's birth date. And so then I followed suit and I used first initial, middle name, birth date. So the 9/15 is just my birthday. Thank you, AOL.
All right. Yes. Well, I like that throwback. It sort of keeps you attached to your roots. And Dave.
So you can find me on Twitter at David Franjosa. I have the website reimagineschools.com. And the WordPress is just that /WP. So everything will be out there. When the book comes out, there will be a link on the website for it.
Okay, fantastic. I can't wait for that one. And I'm also looking forward to checking out your book. Jillian, how can we connect with you?
All right. So I am, here at Twitter at Jill Dubois 22. I also have a little website, jilliandubois.com, and that will link everything to my book that is available on Amazon or Codebreaker.
And I'm glad you said Dubois, because I've been saying Dubois. That's the French, or I'm not actually French, but that's the Canadian influence, I guess. So Dubois, good to hear that. Well, thank you to all of you for a really wonderful and inspiring conversation today about book writing and publishing. Fawn says, Tim, your word is awesome. Thank you for all you do. Sherry says, the audience will be new teachers and those discouraged seasoned teachers. Don't want to miss any last comments here. Fawn says he goes with the birth date and year as well. And Laura says, so you would think I could remember your birthday then, Rochelle Dene. Yes, no excuse, Laura. You've got to make sure to reach out to Rochelle on her birthday. But again, thank you to all of you for sharing your journeys. It's really so inspiring and helpful, and you shared so many good strategies. So you've fought that good fight, and I'm hoping to get on that train and get to the other side as well at some point. Hopefully this year, we'll see if it happens. But to everyone who joined us, Sherry and Debbie and Laura and so many others, best of luck to you in 2021 as you continue to create and write. And I'll look forward to connecting with all of you again soon. Take care, happy holidays, and have a happy new year, everyone. Bye-bye.